Oh, you wanted more. And you can't keep up now. Welcome to another episode of the National Pulse, Tuesday, October the 19th, the year of our Lord 2021. It is actually a pretty beautiful day out here on Capitol Hill. As beautiful as Capitol Hill can ever be. I actually took a 6-mile run up and down the National Mall, stood up next to Honest Abe up there, over at the Lincoln Memorial. So I'm feeling good, energetic. I hope you are too. There's a lot to talk about today. There's a lot going on that is kind of bubbling beneath the surface. And our guest today is somebody who gets all of that, understands the signal through the noise. Long-standing listeners of this show, back when it was a television show, in fact, will remember Kane from citizenfreepress.com. I'm sure probably everybody who listens to this show goes to citizenfreepress.com every single day. I know I do. And I follow on Getter, on Twitter. It's just one of the most inimitable, let's say, websites, news aggregation sites out there. And so, with that in mind, why delay any further? Let's bring in Kane from citizenfreepress.com. Kane, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's been a while here on the National Pulse.
Glad to be here. This is going to be historic. I was waiting, man. How slow is Raheem going to talk during that intro? It blew me away.
I got to kill 2 minutes of the intro, and it's funny that you mentioned that. See, you and I are always kind of accidentally in tune with each other, or at least
TV production.
Well, no. I tell you what I'm going to do. Probably is change the intro music. I know it's a big deal.
Oh, so that's what you're covering for? To cover for that?
Yeah, the intro.
Yeah.
Is just
so
too
wait
long.
a sec. So there are several things. I'm going to ask a ton of questions today. So number one, how many days in a row of a podcast is this?
This is now 3. This is 3, and it's 4 in the last 5 days. So we're back.
Yeah,
baby.
that's. I know. I'll let listeners know. I got the text message to do it Sunday, and I was going to golf. One of the rare times golfing in the last 4.5 years, and it rained. And yeah, I know. I'll survive.
Man.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty decent Biden. You just
Well, that was Joe Biden, so.
No, that's what I mean. That was you have a little button. You've got a button you push. Damn it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was excellent. You weren't British anymore. Yeah, so 3 days in a row, 4 out of the last 5. That's impressive. A 6-mile run, is that new? Have you always been a runner?
I took up running in late July of this year, and I ran the Tunnel to Towers 5K through the tunnel from Brooklyn to Manhattan about a month ago. And I wouldn't say I've fallen in love with it. It's very difficult to do, but what happens at the end of the run is worth the pain of the run. It just is.
Do you get a run? Yeah. Do you get a runner's high?
Yeah, for sure. You're listening to it right now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Natural energy. So how many people were in that New York City Bridges race?
Do you know what? It must have been thousands. And it was so difficult because in that tunnel, it gets so close and claustrophobic and stuffy and hot. And of course, it was still 85 degrees in Manhattan that day. It was grueling. But then you get through the tunnel and you see all of these people who are serving as firemen or policemen, and they're all holding up massive banners, like 6-foot high banners of the people who fell in 9/11, or the friends that they lost. And they're cheering you on. You know, they're going, come on, you can do it, you can do it. And I'm like, well, I should be standing there cheering you guys on. But it was just, it was such an amazing event. And anybody that wants to run it with me next year, you included, Kane, are more than welcome.
Listen to the little laughter. That's good. That's a good story. So what is DC? What's the move? You're out there. You're on the streets. You went and visited Abe Lincoln today at your 6-mile run. what? It's probably in the 60s.
Yeah, it's in the mid 60s today. Mm-hmm.
So fall is taking over DC. Do people? Is sort of the elite deep state lobbying class? Are they just resigned? What I'm curious about is on the right, we're a little, both sides are an echo chamber, but so we can stay in our own worlds. I'm just wondering because DC is 95% Democrats.
Oh yeah.
How do they what do they like when you go to bars, when you go to restaurants and you talk to Democrats, people from across the aisle, do they admit that Biden is a blundering fool, that this administration is failing on all these different levels?
100%.
Or do they just,
nope, 100%.
They admit it?
100%. They love it. They love it because the lobbyists, no, they do. The lobbyists and the interests realize that without strong leadership, they have more power. They can take their ideas and their clients' requirements to the very top, and it's far easier to get their way. They love it. They drink to it. They cheers to it. And let me tell you something, my experience, the little amount of time I've spent in Washington, D.C. this summer, is that these people are fully cognizant and grateful for the fact that they have a zombie in the Oval Office.
Yeah, that's frightening. That's disturbing to hear. It's funny when you're a Democrat, right? And you've got a blundering president like we haven't seen since Gerald Ford, and much worse, in fact, than Ford was. But you know that the media is on your side. You have nothing to worry about. You know that you're sort of, any bad stories are going to be protected. They aren't going to be broadcast on 95% of the news. So that's what I'm always thinking about. It's like, how to get, Democrats, they just live they're able to live in a completely different world because they have media protection.
Yeah,
and
I mean, did you hear what Jen Psaki said today about the
No,
supply chain delays? Hold on, maybe I can play this. I'm not even sure if I remember how to do this, but let me get her to tell you. Let me try and get her to tell you herself.
Just a question on the timing on the supply chain issue. Actions that the president has taken. It was clear in March of 2020 when COVID hit that the supply chains across the world had been disrupted. Even as the sort of work to fight back against COVID proceeded, it was crystal clear that things were not improving on supply chain. People couldn't get dishwashers and furniture and treadmills delivered on time, not to mention all sorts of other things. So why is it...
The tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed.
Right,
The tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed. Talk about missing the point there. And also, aren't we in the middle of a health crisis? I mean, America's certainly in the throes of an obesity crisis, right? And she's making fun of the fact that people are trying to get healthier and they can't get the things that get them healthier. Now, listen, all right, I know treadmill is a luxury product to have in your house. I get that. But he said dishwashers. We're talking about all sorts of things here. And she has the temerity to stand up there and go, the tragedy of the treadmill crisis. Give me a break.
Yeah, Psaki, and I couldn't hear the guy. I missed the date, but it sounded like he was trying to frame it as a Trump problem. Did he not say since the beginning of the pandemic of March of 2020? So it's sort of like the media giving her an opportunity to blame this on Trump and say that this started way before Biden, or did I get that day wrong?
No, I think that's right. But I think also built into that question was saying, hey, you guys have known about this coming down the pipeline for a very long time. You say you're the grown-ups in the room. You say that you prepared for this. And we've now known about this problem for coming up for 2 years, and you still don't have a plan.
Yeah, and Buttigieg is on maternity leave.
Chest feeding.
Did you see? I'm sure you saw the photo, right? The breastfeeding photo with the fake plastic
chest
food.
feeding. Chest feeding.
Yeah. I know. I need work on my language.
Oh, and today, the first female 4-star officer is a man.
Yeah, he's a man. I called him Richard. It's always a really interesting decision I have to make when I do a story on a transgender. Is what name do I use?
Right.
And so Richard goes by Rachel now, and the photo was insane. And here's a question. I didn't have time to do research. Does Richard Levine have any military experience?
No.
None.
Not to my knowledge. No.
Yeah, that people were asking that in CFP Nation. But yeah, they make him a 4-star admiral. They use, and people, on Twitter, it's sort of a broken record to say what people on Twitter are saying, but they were, in general, the replies were plauditory and were, this would have never happened under the Trump administration and all other kinds of crap, which actually is sort of Well, it wouldn't have happened. That's certain under Trump. But, you know, they try to always make it seem like Trump was horrible for gay rights. And we know he was probably the most open embracing gays of any Republican president.
He's a New Yorker.
So anyway.
He saw it every day, you know?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You've got this picture at the bottom of your story on this. It says Levine and Mark Milley attended the same high school.
Same high school.
But were they the same person is the question. Because, you know, that juxtaposition there in that picture, I don't know. Like, they could be related.
Well, they played on the football team together. That even gets more interesting. It was a Lancaster. I think it was a private school in Lancaster, and they both played on the football team. Yeah, it's bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre in promoting, you know, because you wonder every calculation, right? All of these things are political calculations. So when they're thinking, you know, when we make this move, is it going to hurt us with our base? Is it going to hurt us with independents? Is it going to hurt us with Republicans? Well, obviously they don't get Republican votes for the most part. So it's a weird calculation. I have to think independents don't really like this kind of stuff. I think I don't know.
Oh, we'll see. I think you're absolutely correct, because what they do, where their minds go, is not to, like, you know, hatred for this individual. That's not where anybody's minds go on this, I don't believe. I mean, you know, barring the fringe of the fringe, I think their minds go to, oh, this is the type of person that's stopping my daughter being able to win, you know, gold medals in track.
There you go.
Yeah, I think you're right. The moderates and the independents do not like to see this stuff. But that's the thing about the regime, right? They don't care what people like. They're not interested in what you're interested in. They have this government right now. I never thought I'd be able to say this, Kane. The American government has not one iota, not one scintilla of interest in what the American public thinks.
And I think that's part of the capture of the party by the far left. But you mentioned the transgender thing, so I want to go there quickly. I posted it. You probably saw it. The headline that from the Daily Mail this week last week that there was a study on men, transgender men doing girls' sports, and obviously the left has tried to push the whole time that, oh no, they have 2 years of taking hormones and they've lost all of their strength, which is just absolute nonsense. If you see the photo of the Olympic weightlifter, still had the muscular build of a man. And there was an MMA fight even a month ago with a trans man fighting as a woman, and she was so much bigger than than his female opponent.
Oh, I don't fancy my chances against Rachel Levine in a fist fight.
Yeah, well, yeah, no. I mean, you can't tell how big she is, but she played football with Millie, so she learned how to fight.
So, again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not aware of it, the website is citizenfreepress.com, and I think you have something to tell us about the success of Citizen Free Press.
Yep. It's I made the numbers public this morning at about 5 a.m. when I finished working for the day. Mm-hmm. So before I say this, people really have to understand how bizarre and how surreal all of this is. You know the story, Raheem, because you've had me on from the beginning. But I'm just a guy in an office in Bloomington, Indiana. I worked for CNN for Lou Dobbs and Moneyline, so I have journalism experience. But for the most part, I was a retired trader who was golfing and had a great life. And I always thought that there should be an alternative to Drudge. And so I started it 4.5 years ago when no one was really turned against Drudge yet. It was April of 2017. He hadn't really turned against Trump. You know, it was just to be an alternative. So I literally on that day, without telling anyone, without getting any media coverage, I didn't reach out to any writers, nothing. I just sort of sat down and started writing snarky headlines. I decided just to take my revenge, you know, on all of these people in the media, whom I hate so much. And so just to fast forward 4.5 years later, what I'm about to tell you. So yes, the numbers, these are all available on SimilarWeb and they're all public. And for the first time, and I got the confirmation of this from Bannon himself, who was running Breitbart in 2012 after Andrew had passed away. Mm-hmm. And it's just the first month since 2012 that Breitbart has finished number 2 in monthly page views for all, for conservative sites in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Citizen has grown from 1 reader to 500, about 500,000 daily readers now. Mm-hmm. And we did in U.S. page views, we did 116 million page views last month. Breitbart did, I think it was about 112 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That is
anyway.
Let me just unpack that a little bit. You talked about SimilarWeb there. I don't know if most people are aware of SimilarWeb. I mean, this is a pretty, a very neutral, just a data collection thing on websites that rank sites
with 200 PhDs, and they're a public company. They do their best to get all the particulars of traffic for all public sites. And the reason, just so people know, the reason this is important is SimilarWeb is the only public place that you can go and look up the details of traffic for any website, right? Yeah. So if you run a website like you do, you want to know how your competitors are doing, how you're doing. So it's a huge resource that exists. And the reason I started doing these monthly ratings about 5 months ago was because Drudge started doing them. Yep. Every month. There's a bit of a backstory to this. I did a story about Drudge's traffic falling 65%. This is about a year ago I did the story. Mm-hmm. Drudge saw the story. 3 days later, he had his traffic profile removed from Quantcast after having had it there 18 years. And he had it removed, and so there was no longer a way to sort of track Drudge's traffic. But I pointed out that he, how he used to say famously, thanks a billion every month, and he was saying, more than a billion page views. Well, it was down to 500,000 or so. And so I pointed this out, but so Drudge felt it. You could tell because his next headline was that he did on traffic was thanks 500 million. And it was kind of tongue in cheek. So he knew. But anyway, the point was about 5 or 6 months ago, he started doing these blue graphs every month, these blue charts, as soon as the SimilarWeb numbers became available. And he chose page views, which is, of course, the measurement you want to use because, as you know, that's how you get paid in this industry from advertising is how many times your page loads with an ad on it. Sure. So in other words, there's several metrics. There's visitors, visits, and page views. But so anyway, Drudge started doing this, and he never included us. He never included Citizen Free Press, even though we would have fit in, this is 6 months ago, near the bottom of his list. And it pissed me off. And so I decided to start doing my own. And in this year, we've grown. Since I did the first one, we had 72 million, I think, in May, 72 million U.S. page views. And it grew, like I said, to 116 million last month. It was actually in August, which was a bigger month for everyone because of Afghanistan, as you know. Mm-hmm. We did 124 million US, but we hadn't beat Breitbart. Breitbart was still ahead by a couple million. Yeah. But anyway, so it's crazy.
So let's put this into perspective for people. So on this web news race post that you have up on citizenfreepress.com right now, September 2021, the Daily Wire 40 million, the LA Times 49 million, Zero Hedge 64 million, the Gateway Pundit 78 million, Politico 107 million, Wall Street Journal 111 million, Breitbart 112 million, HuffPost 112 million, Citizen Free Press, 116 million. Then you have your kind of, the New York Times and Drudge who get, New York Times has 607 million, Drudge has 562 million, Washington Post 279, New York Post 173. But your trajectory, your growth, and I want you to talk a little bit about, not just, hey, well done, Kane, you're running a great site and you're getting a lot of traffic. What does it tell you? What does it mean about the thirst for not just real conservative news, but also the way you present it, right? The snarky headlines. I just think it's an unparalleled aggregator.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot there. Those are very kind words. Here, a little thought, as long as you went through those numbers, and it's a great chart. I'm going to do, and you'll find this in your mind. SimilarWeb allows you to break down traffic by direct, by search, and by referral. And what's really interesting is the ones above me, right? New York Times, Washington Post, and New York Post. They get a huge amount, only about 30 to, I know the actual numbers. New York Times, it's 50%. So only half their traffic is direct. In the case of New York Post, it's 35%. So what a lot of those sites, people are wondering, why do they have such high page views? Well, they're the number one Google search result for everything, right? Anything political and even non-political, New York Times and New York Post and Washington Post all come up first. So that dramatically inflates their traffic numbers, right? And I call those kind of visitors flybys. They aren't users of your website. They don't come back. You're usually on mobile phones. and they see your story, they find your story in Google search or on social media, and they come very quickly. We get none of that at Citizen Free Press. We do not have a Facebook page. We have pretty much no Twitter presence whatsoever. So it's almost all of ours is direct traffic. Now, back to your bigger question of what does it mean? It's weird. A huge part of the success of Citizen Free Press are the commenters, right? It's from visiting. The site gets more than 20,000 comments a day, right? I do not require registration to comment. And it's one of the few places that doesn't. So it's really the largest open platform, anonymous, because there's no tracking, right? You don't have to register, so you aren't being tracked. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big part of the success, right? People arrive at the site to a certain story and they see 450 comments, right? And so they're intrigued. They think, wow, this site must get a decent amount of traffic. So that's part of what's made it grow. But back to your thirst question, it's out there, man. There's room for, there is an absolute thirst on our side. Why? Because 95% of the rest of the media is against us. It's what I talked about briefly before with the bias. I've talked about this recently with Howard Polskin, who analyzes sort of right-wing traffic. And he pointed out there's very few big sites on the left. And the reason for that is everything's leftist, right? You don't need left-wing sites when you have Washington Post and New York Times and all of the television media and all of these networks. But we don't have any of that. We have Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, War Room, and then we have our blogs. And that's all. Anyway, and that's sort of what Citizen Free Press is, obviously it's an aggregator, but if I do 100 stories a day, I try to do 70 or 80 of my own. It didn't originally start that way, as you know. It was much more outbound links, and it's going to go back to more outbound links in the future. But it's that people demanded to be able to comment. They're always like, Kane, why can't we comment on this story? You link to National Pulse or you link to PJ Media. You know what? We want to comment. So. Well, I'll let you jump in.
It makes, I just love listening to you. It makes sense. One of the reasons we don't have a comment section on our site is just how long it takes to kind of moderate out things that our hosts would pull the website down for. You'll always get some trolls and some people who are trying to push the boundaries. And it's not us. Yep. I don't care if people want to scream blue murder in the comments. That's the nature of public discourse. But these tech tyrants, these big companies, will pull the entire site down especially if somebody reports them. And I don't know if you know this, we lost one of our advertising partners recently, and it cost us circa $40,000 because they just, pardon my French for the people in the audience who keep leaving comments saying I've got a potty mouth, but they just pussied out, and we can't kind of take that risk as a very, we are a small site, we're a boutique site, we do investigative work. And if we get pulled down, if we get a legal bill, I might have to shut up shop overnight, frankly, if I got a legal bill from one of these companies. But I know you had other questions for me. I know you wanted to, make this the single greatest podcast ever in the history of podcasts. So I want to throw it back to you. You seemed, especially when I called you this morning, and we're talking about doing this, you seemed like you had a lot to get off your chest, or maybe to pry out of my chest. So what is there? Yeah,
both. In fact, it's just, my excitement in general was, one, we haven't been together on the air since the National Pulse TV show. Yeah. And then two, I knew that we'd be able to talk about the inner workings, the behind the scenes stuff about how websites work and how traffic works. And I know that people find that stuff really, really interesting. So I was looking forward to that talk.
Yeah.
But as for questions for you don't even remember, after my first TV appearance, I was like, man, on the next show, I was like, I want to do a question and answer session with you because my readers had so much. So the first thing I want to talk about, I use this photo a lot of you. It's when you were young, without a beard, and you're with Lady Thatcher.
Yep.
All right. You tweeted it out once. I didn't tell you. I saw the photo. I saw your tweet. I copied it. I was like, I'm going to use that photo in the future. So tell people a little bit about that photo in that moment, because I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, politics is full of people who just kind of go to these events to take pictures with the with the principal and the important person to make themselves feel more important. A friend of mine, I would say a friend of mine, a colleague of mine. No, I'm kidding for when he listens to this and hears it. Matthew Tiermand is notorious for this. People will know him from the Hunter Biden hard drive stuff, and he's now working closely with Getter and other groups, and he works closely with Project Veritas. But he is notorious for posting on his Facebook every time he's anywhere near any famous person or whatever, and I find that to just be total cringe. There are rooms that I've been in and things, people I've been around and things I've seen that kind of I look back sometimes and think, oh, I wish I had taken a picture of that. And this picture with Margaret Thatcher, with Lady Thatcher, as you say, is one of those moments where that wasn't a picture I asked to be taken. Somebody had just taken it and sent it to me. And
right.
I wish
you weren't right. You weren't even. How old were you?
That's a good question. I must have been 25. I must have been 25.
So done with the university.
Yeah. As young as I looked, I was in my mid-20s. It was it was an event at the Guildhall in the city of London, and it was a big reception, and there was going to be a big banquet dinner in her honor later on that evening, and I worked for one of the groups that was putting on this event. Much to my chagrin, my boss came up to me at the time, and he said, Raheem, unfortunately, the British government doesn't provide Lady Thatcher with much in terms of security. She had one short, I'm talking like 5'3" female police officer with her. And he said, Stunning. And she's getting overwhelmed. We put her on in a chair in the middle of the room because so many people want to talk to her and meet her and shake her hand and tell her that they love her, but she's getting overwhelmed, and we don't have the ability to deal with that. So, Raheem, if you wouldn't mind, could you just stand next to her, puff your chest out, and discourage people from A, taking too long with her, and B, getting too much in her personal space. And so that's what I did. I kind of acted as the stand-in bodyguard for Lady Thatcher for the evening, and I'm ever so grateful for it, because she was, look, I'm not going to say, like any other politician, I'm not going to say she was perfect and that she did everything correctly, but her demeanor, her spirit, the spirit in which she went to work every day for the nation was just we haven't had a good one since, quite frankly. And so I was just honored to be in, reveling in that reflected glow that she was giving off that night.
So you were already pretty heavily into politics at 25. Or not?
More policy at that time than politics. But yeah, I would hang out at the Marquis of Granby pub, for those that know it, in Westminster, and the Red Lion, and you'd meet these figures. That's how I met Nigel as well. Was just hanging out at a Westminster pub, and that's an interesting story.
You met him. Let's hear it. You met Nigel at a pub.
Well, so Nigel wasn't. He was famous, but he wasn't kind of like wildly famous in 2012, 2013. Those were the years where the establishment kind of liked him around as the comic relief. He was the kind of pressure valve to everything. They never really thought that he and UKIP, and I say that staring at a big picture of a UKIP billboard and a big picture of Nigel Farage that I have up on my wall in front of me here, and they didn't think he was going anywhere. So he was just kind of the man about Westminster. He'd turn up at the pub, smoke a couple of fags, cigarettes, have a few pints, and tell people why Britain needed to be independent of the EU and why we needed to not adopt the euro. And, kind of the establishment types would kind of just go, oh, yeah, that's funny. Keep smoking your fags and drinking your pints. Very funny, mate. And, because these are the types of people who drink, I don't know, quinoa smoothies or whatever. And so one day, there's the birthday party for a lady called Joanne Hilditch. She was a BBC producer at a fancy restaurant called the Rue in Parliament Square. And I'm upstairs at this party, very nice, very swanky, and a boy from West London, born into an immigrant family, no airs and graces about me, pretty shitty university I went to, really not a great school I went to, but I cared, and I just wanted to get involved. So I would just show up everywhere, right? And get in people's faces and talk to them and make friends and figure out what was going on. And I went downstairs outside to smoke a cigarette on the pavement, and standing out there was Nigel Farage. Now, we had said hello to each other in passing at Westminster pubs, but I'd never really had a one-on-one conversation. So I walked up to him, said, "Do you mind if I join you?" He's always welcoming to everyone. He says, yeah. He goes, "No, of course, old boy. Puff away."
Right.
So we get to talk.
This is great.
Only you can get this stuff out of me, by the way. We get to talking, and the night before, I had taken a young lady who shall remain nameless out to dinner at a restaurant in Westminster, and she was just a good friend of mine. She had actually dated another friend of mine. I wasn't interested in hooking up with her or whatever, but she comes walking along, greets Nigel, greets me, and says, "Nigel, did you know Raheem took me out last night? We had 2 bottles of rosé and 24 oysters, and he didn't even try and fuck me." And Nigel looks me up and down, and goes, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And that was how we made friends. That was how we met. It's just a great Nigel story. So yeah, there are all these ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk some memory. I mean, I'm staring at the picture of us in Donald Trump's in his living room 2 days after the 2016 election, and again, the conversations and just the things in that room are just so funny. I mean, I'll save some for the autobiography.
Right. Well, now I know why you said that only I could get that story out of you. I did not expect that punchline. And about the 2 bottles of wine in your date. That's so classic. He does seem like a man of the people, and I had no idea that in 2012 he was just hanging out in pubs, because he wasn't, as you said, it wasn't really Brexit time yet, so he hadn't become famous. UKIP hadn't become big. It's interesting to hear that stuff.
Well, the funny thing is, he still does. He still does. The only difference is now he has to have security everywhere. So he refuses to give up, what he loves and that lifestyle, and London as a place, right? But now he has to have a driver and security, and it's all, none of it's paid for by the state, none of it's picked up by the taxpayer. It's all privately paid for. And it's such a sad thing to watch when. I mean, most people are friendly, actually, towards him. Most people, I would say 80% of the interactions that he has on the street are people who are just going, "Come on, Nigel, yeah." But the odd one or two that you get, it's so sad that a man who is desperately worked to save. I mean, this guy, remember, Nigel could have been a multi-millionaire, maybe even a billionaire, if he had stuck to working in the city and working in the metals exchange and all of those things that he did before. And at 29 years old, he decided, you know what, I have to make sure that we don't enter the euro. I have to make sure that we leave the European Union. And that's what he's done all of his life. And it's so sad to watch people who've never done a thing like that in their lives be abusive towards him.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, actually, is what is the reception like for him in the bars, in the pubs when he goes? And I didn't know that history of him, that he gave up a metals trading career, a super successful metals trading career to get the UK out of the EU. And I'm going to have to do more research on him. It's people should know how. I'll have facts wrong, I'm sure, as I say this, but Raheem, people listening, Raheem you were head of the UK Independence Party maybe before you were 30. Is this correct, sir?
I wasn't. I was Nigel's chief advisor.
You were his chief advisor. You ran. That's what it was. You ran for the head of UK Independence Party, correct?
Yeah, for like a week until I realized that there was there was a 6-week long election process to take over from Nigel, and I was 29 years old. I was back in London on a little bit of a vacation, and I thought to myself, we can't have UKIP being pulled to the left, which is basically what all the other candidates were standing for, making it more woke, making it more lefty, liberal, fluffy, doing PR and all that kind of, crap stuff that has changed the Conservative Party into a left-wing party too. And so I threw my hat in the ring just to be able to make some public speeches and public statements about the importance of the direction of where the party went. They didn't listen to me, and now UKIP polls are, I think, under 1%. But hey ho, that's the way things go. I dropped out because I was told by the party chairman at a hustings, which was an event with donors where they were going to be able to weigh and measure all the different candidates. The party chairman effectively looked me up and down, and he said, even if you won the election, we wouldn't let you take over the party anyway. So I said, well, it's a bridge too far. I happen to believe they would have stitched up the actual election rather than anything post-election. And I just thought to myself, I've got this ability and offer to go and work in America. Why would I give that up when these guys are already telling me that we're not going to allow you to take the reins of this party?
Right. We will castrate you.
And I don't regret it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you were obviously at 29 when you do that for a week. You were already fully friends with Nigel. Had you?
Yeah, that's after I'd worked for him for years and years.
Oh, that's after you had worked for him. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the thing people don't understand is that British political campaigns are run on a shoestring. You can really only spend about £10,000 per constituency, per district, in the 30-day election period before polling day. And so when Nigel was running in South Thanet in 2015, I mean, we would share a house. He slept on a mattress on the floor. I slept in a single bed. We had a 19-inch television that we had got from Argos or something like that, little store. And that was it. That was all that there was in the house. I remember us coming home one night. We had been down the pub, which is where we did most of our best campaigning. And we'd been down the pub, might have had a little bit too much, and we were hungry. And Nigel comes back to the apartment that we were sharing, and he says, what have you got in? Because he hadn't been there for a few days. He says, what have you got in? I said, well, I got some leftover Chinese from the night before. He said, oh, no, that won't do. He marches outside. It's probably midnight. Marches outside to his car, opens the boot, comes back in with a cooler bag, the trunk, comes back inside with a cooler bag, whacks it down on the table, unzips it, pulls out 2 big, fresh lobsters, and just cracks them open and starts scooping them into his mouth. And I said, where did you get these lobsters from that are just sitting in your trunk in a cooler bag? And he just looked at me. He goes, man's got to have lobsters. Just bizarre. Wow. Now, I didn't get any of the lobster, by the way. I had to eat the leftover Chinese food.
Wow, that's a classic story. He sounds like, what a great guy to have beers with. What a great guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah,
I've always liked him. I knew nothing about him until Brexit. Before Brexit happened, and I fell in love with him because he was so ballsy. He was so Trumpish. It's the same thing. It's the whole screw the media, screw all of you. This is the truth. Stop lying. The people believe in what we believe, and it's just I fall prey. I love that attitude, and that's why I like Nigel. And so anyway, because we are going to be limited. I have no idea how much time. I keep looking at the clock, so I do have another. Sure. If I'm going to get one more question for Raheem.
Perfect.
This is the question that CFP Nation has every time I post something about you, which is, when the hell is Raheem going to be back on television? And before you answer, I just want to say, because I said this in the first interview, and I'm not blowing smoke. I was a junior producer, then a regular producer at Moneyline. Whatever. I don't like compliments. You don't like them either, but you're really good. You have a supreme talent to bullshit on the air without a written script. Tucker's a great writer. I know that when you write a script, you're a fantastic writer as well. But you have an ability that he doesn't have, and I don't really think anyone. I watch more political news than anyone should, and all I'm ever doing is analyzing these people and their skill sets, and there really isn't. And you think I'm blowing smoke, but I'm not. There really isn't someone with this bullshitting skill set, non-scripted bullshitting skill set that you have. And I, along with CFP Nation, believe that your future, if it is not in politics, that it is on television. The big contract. I'm talking about one of the 3 or 4 time slots, and I'm talking 5-10 years down the road. One of the 3 or 4 top time slots at Fox News with a $20 million a year contract, fulfilling all of the dreams of your grandmother that she always knew you could achieve. So to get there, are you going to embrace this as a possibility in your future? 2, the path I've always said, like, you're better than anybody who would be, there's a couple good people on Newsmax. Well, whatever. I'll stop. I'll go back to the question. Do you see this in your future, Raheem?
Not voluntarily. I mean, with a gun to my head, perhaps. I look. It's you know this. It's really difficult. It's really difficult. Yeah. It's so draining. Let me put it into perspective for people. We used to do this 1 hour television show at 3 p.m. on Real America's Voice. That 1 hour took all day to plan and produce. Yep. If there was a monologue, booking guests, liaising with producers, making sure you have the right clips up, the right audio up, the right chyrons up, right. All of this stuff. And it's so labor intensive that by the end of the show, i.e. by 4 p.m. every day, I was not just exhausted, but then punishing my body more by going and having 6 or 7 martinis at Morton's just to take the edge off, Right. And then you wake up in the morning and you do the same thing, and it's so very difficult. The people who do this, right? And let's take someone like Jack Posobiec as an example, who has his new show. He has endless amounts of energy, just endless amounts of energy. And I can't profess to have that. What I have, as you say, is the ability to turn, dead air or dead space or whatever into
something interesting.
Yeah.
When you speak, you always have unique thoughts, and it's interesting, but go ahead.
Yeah. God gave me a gift to just blab and make sure that blabbery was interesting. Right. And I'm so grateful for that. But that's why I think this format probably lends to a little better. I would prefer to go the radio route, honestly, because it cuts a lot of the televisual crap that you have to deal with out. I would get so stressed, and this is I'm not trying to dunk on anybody at Real America's Voice or any producer or anything like that. Mistakes happen, right, in the industry, but I would get so stressed if one of my guests' names was spelled incorrectly on the chyron. My blood would boil, and most people at home don't even notice or see that.
Right.
So why do I care? Because I care. I care about the product. I care about its integrity. I care that other people in the industry aren't looking at that and going, what a bunch of rank amateurs. And so it was destroying me, honestly. It was hurting me to a point where I just had to throw my hands up and say, do you know what? It's better that I take some time back to myself and figure out what the best way to communicate with the wider public is. And I think, I guest hosted the Sean Hannity radio show. I used to guest host for Buck Sexton on his radio show. I love this, which is what I'm doing right now, which is there's a microphone, there's no camera in this room, and I've got a great guest, and I've got my laptop, and that I think is the most compelling type of content out there. I'm very grateful for your compliments. I really don't want to.
Well, a couple thoughts. The first thought I had is, what if it was your only job? So as you were saying that, I kept thinking, well, what if you had because in this future you would have a massive production staff, and a lot of these things would be taken care of. But it would still be, as people say, it's an hour a day, but you spend 10 hours preparing for it and then 3 hours recovering from it afterwards, and it takes a toll. The second thought is radio. That's a fantastic idea, for you. And I had no idea that you had filled in for Hannity. Radio agents should be paying attention because of the stuff I said before, because you're really, really good at this.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I'll tell you a little secret, little secret story. So I guested for Sean in the studio up in New York once, and as I finished and I left the studio, I said to the producer, who was a friend of mine at the time, I said to her, "So how do you think it went?" She goes, "I don't think we can have you back." I said, "Why not?" She goes, they liked you more than they like him.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. I mean,
sure, she was just blowing smoke up my ass, but it was a nice thing to hear.
Right. And it's, and then the voice is even more prevalent when it's just radio, and it's soothing, for what so much, I'm sure there's been psychology work done on why British accents seem soothing to American ears. But yeah, it's perfect. And look, you can get, you can be the first guy with a $20 million a year radio contract. So I'll continue to be your virtual agent.
Happy to take that. To take that.
And I'll advocate on your behalf. And it's true. Go ahead.
Let me, because you're the guest. Well, you're supposed to be the guest on this show today. You've turned into the interviewer. I want to throw a question back, because we are short on time. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to throw a question back at you here. You've obviously had just rip-roaring success now with Citizen Free Press. Where does the future lie for you? Where does the future lie for the site? What are your plans?
500 million by the end of 2024. Here's what it's about. You figured this out about me. I care. Look, I'm a news junkie. I've always loved news. But
that's your applause.
Are you there?
That's your
okay.
applause.
Oh. But even more than being a news junkie, what I am is competitive. I had a brother 12 months older, so my entire life was I was trained on competition, and so from the beginning, it's been about growth and seeing the numbers every single day. People have no idea how much. I've got 6 or 7 different metric services that I use. So yes, I'm fixated on growth. It's stunning. It is literally completely stunning to me that Citizen passed Breitbart, right? I never imagined that. In January of 2019, as I've told you, I was sitting there after running the site for almost 2 years, and I had 5 million page views a month. And that's nothing to snap, that's fine. That's in fact fantastic.
Yeah.
5 million, you can make a good living. You can, if you put ads up, you can, it puts you in the top 30 or 40 conservative sites. But that was, so just the idea that it's grown from 5 million to, my actual Cloudflare, actual server numbers for people, these are people who don't SimilarWeb and Google Analytics don't count people who have ad blockers and privacy blockers because they block the trackers. And so a good part of your audience and my audience, because we have the same audience, about 40% is not being tracked by Google Analytics and by these other services.
Right.
So my actual server number, when I mentioned that I did 116 million, it was 161 million on my Cloudflare server number. So my point was to go from 5 million 2.5 years ago to 160 million. It's literally, it's surreal that it's happened. The growth is every month. It really is organic. People share it. It's 6,000 or 7,000 new regular readers every month, and that turns into just a certain number of page views. So I sort of know the growth, and I make predictions in my head all the time, and it sort of meets them. But now, punditry in me, I could give a shit. The only show I like appearing on is your show and War Room. I even had a chance. Some Tucker Carlson producers reached out to Spencer, and I had a chance, and I was like, well, maybe in a year or two. I don't really even, none of that sort of appeals to me because of all the work, like you said.
Yeah.
That goes into sort of
Kane,
being on television.
I get an interview request every single day from somewhere, shape. I got one this morning from Newsmax. I just can't fit it in. I can't do it. Or the site doesn't run. Stories don't get published. At the end of the day, you and I are interested in the same thing, right? Which is the news. If I'm a few drinks deep on the Morton's Terrace, I am often heard to pound the table and just say, "I do the news. I do the news," right? And that's what I do, and everything else just is trying to get other eyeballs on that news. It's not my goal to be on your TV. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point about getting other eyeballs. Right. That's the secret ingredient to what we all do. You can publish great content, and you and Natalie do all the time in National Post, but you got to get people to read it, right? And so lucky you and I have become friends, and I help direct as many people as I can. Well, I don't mention it for that reason. You have been fantastic in helping to promote Citizen. And I even, we still have that conversation in the future that we're going to have where I teach you how to post headlines. So you can, that's the great thing that you can write anything you want in a headline as Citizen. I'll let you get away with it. and so you get to say things about people and no one knows it's you saying them. And it's sort of, in that sense, Citizen really is a political gossip rack. It's lowbrow in as many ways as it possibly can be, and I'm proud of that. But I want to wrap up.
You have, and take this from a British guy, you have the old sense of the British tabloids, the really cutting sense. I look at your headlines, Kane, and I think, well, I couldn't have come up with that, and I regard myself as good at tabloid headlines.
Well, yeah, it's fun stuff. I'm doing a story on Justin Trudeau, and then I do a sub-headline that Justin Trudeau is the actual son of Fidel Castro, which I'm 100% convinced he is, and I post side-by-side photos showing it. But yeah, ultimately, it's the tabloid aspect of politics that is really interesting, and those are the stories that get the most clicks. Of course, there's the anger
story
side.
Right now, as we're recording this, right? When I went to it, I sat down, I loaded it up, and it's just, nope, Katie, you just sucked as an anchor. Obviously, I'm clicking into that story. Like, how do I not? How can I not know who that Katie is and who sucked as an anchor? Obviously, it's Katie Couric now that I tap into it. Yeah. But it's a genius way of running a site. It's absolutely unmitigated genius.
It didn't happen. I mean, it happened by accident, right? You can do two types of headlines. You can do literal headlines that tell the story, or you can do reaction headlines.
Right.
And so I flipped to this reaction mode a lot, and I try to prevent myself from doing it. Like, well, whatever, you know. But yeah, with Katie, her statement about people not wanting a female anchor, it's such bullshit that I had to respond in the way that I did. So there you go.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Anything else to impart before we let you go?
Nothing, except this was the best, most epic, historic podcast in the history of Raheem Kassam, even though I haven't listened to most. And I love this. I love being able to talk freely about politics and the background stuff, as well as websites and how websites work. And so I look forward to doing this again with you sometime in the future.
We got to make this a regular thing. The content's too good. Kane, citizenfreepress.com. Make sure you're following across all the social media platforms. Kane, thank you so much. Not just for joining us and being a great guest, but also for being a great interviewer.
Well, yeah, whatever. My skills are there.
I'll talk to you soon, brother. Cheers.
All right. Thanks.
He's just brilliant. He really is. And he's just such a nice guy. And he just really cares. So go over to citizenfreepress.com. Show him some love. Leave a comment in the comments section. Get on Getter. If you're not on getter.com already, there's just so many good people joining Getter now. They're at the 3 million mark on users. The fastest growing social media site. Just blows the others all away. And I'm honored to be verified and a part of it. Dr. Navarro's book, remember, In Trump Time, is coming out soon. You're going to want to make sure you get a copy of that. That is, use the URL in the description on this podcast. It's bit.ly, /Pulse Podcast. If you support our sponsors, you're supporting us. And talking about supporting us, I want to say a great big thank you to some of our newest members. Patty and Cecile and Ida, Sandra, Jim, David, Connor, Thomas, Billy, Pamela, Dennis, Todd, Keith, James. Thank you all so much for joining up at fundrealnews.com. What Kane and I are talking about is real, right? It's real. Conservative media cannot exist without your support. We cannot keep publishing scoops without your support. We can't go out there and recruit new members and give talks to people, waking them up from their slumber to oppose the tyranny that is being imposed on you without your support. Once again, that URL is fundrealnews.com. I thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for your time. Leave a review, share this with friends, leave a comment, and I'll see you again later on this week for the National Pulse.